Well, last week we began a new series entitled Decisions. And of course, this series is all about making wise decisions. The type of decisions that are really important. So when I say decisions, I'm not talking about trivial decisions. I'm not talking about the type of decisions that we make every day. Things like, do I want a Hershey's bar or do I want a Snickers? You know, what am I going to wear to work tomorrow? I don't know how your house works, but usually in the evening when I'm beginning to watch the news, Lisa starts trying on all of these clothes. And the joke around our house is, what am I going to wear tomorrow? Because she's always looking at what she's going to wear tomorrow. Well, I can tell you what I'm going to wear tomorrow. I'm going to wear the first pair of jeans that are in that drawer that I pull out. And I'm going to wear that first shirt that's right there. And if Lisa doesn't alternate them, I'm going to wear the same shirt every day. And it doesn't bother me a bit because that's the way I am. So the joke is, what am I going to wear tomorrow? But anyways, that's not the type of decisions that we're talking about. We're not talking about, do you want sugar in your tea or do you want cream in your coffee? No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the type of decisions that are important, the type of decisions that change your life for better or for worse. We're talking about things like, who are you going to marry? What are you going to do with your life career-wise? Should you borrow to go to school or not? And if so, how much? Those are the type of decisions that determine the course of your life. In other words, those are the type of decisions that determine whether you have a crappy life or a great life. If you make the right decisions in those areas of your life, you're going to have a great life. If you make the wrong decisions, you're going to have a crappy life. People, that's the way life works. Now, as I told you last week, we normally make the most important decisions of our life between the ages of 18 to 25. The only problem is, at that age, very few of us have enough wisdom, knowledge, or understanding to make the right decisions. So we end up marrying someone that we shouldn't have. Or we choose a career that we don't like, or isn't as profitable as we would want it to be. Or we end up getting ourselves into debt by making unwise purchases or taking out loans that we shouldn't have taken out. And when that happens, what do? Well, we get mad at God, like it's His fault that we have a crappy life. People, it's not God's fault if you have a crappy life. It's your fault. You're the one who chose to marry that person. You're the one who chose the wrong career. You're the one who took out thousands of dollars in student loans. You're the one who kept charging things to your credit card. And now you want to blame God? I don't think so. Look at Proverbs chapter 19, verse number 3. Notice what it says. People ruin their lives by their own foolishness and then are angry at the Lord. Do you see that? People ruin their own lives by making foolish decisions, and then they get mad at God like it's His fault. People, it's not His fault. Now, most people try and justify their bad decisions by saying this. Well, I didn't have enough wisdom, knowledge, or understanding at the time to make the right decision. And that's usually true. You see, most of us don't have enough wisdom, knowledge, or understanding to make the right decisions until we're about 40 years old. And by that time, we've made so many bad decisions, it's hard to climb out of the hole that we dug for ourselves. And I get that. So what's the answer? Well, that's what this series is all about. You see, it's possible to make the right decisions even if you really don't possess a lot of wisdom, knowledge, or understanding. In fact, that's such an important statement, I'm going to say it again. It's possible to make the right decisions even if you really don't possess a lot of wisdom, knowledge, or understanding. Now, you might not believe that, but it's true. And I'll show you why it's true in just a second when we talk about core values. But let me assure you that it is true. It is possible to make the right decisions even if you don't possess much wisdom, thanks to core values. So let's talk about core values and what they are and how they work. Core values are defined as fundamental beliefs that dictate our behavior by clearly defining in our conscience the distinction between right and wrong. Now, when I say right and wrong, I don't mean right and wrong in a moral way, from a moral standpoint. I mean right and wrong in the sense of prudent or imprudent. It can mean right and wrong from a moral standpoint, but it can also mean right and wrong in the sense of prudent and imprudent. Now, if you're unfamiliar with those two words, because I used them last week and I had a person ask about that, let me explain what it is. Kind of think of it like this. Prudent means wise in the sense that you're taking into consideration how your decision is going to affect the future. In other words, you understand that what you do today will affect tomorrow. So you want to make sure that you make wise or prudent decisions. Imprudent means rash and foolish. In other words, you don't even consider the future consequences of your actions. You just do it. In fact, you wear the Nike t-shirt that says, just do it, and that's your life. All right? That's not what you want to do. You don't want to just do it. But to keep it simple, think of it like this. Prudent simply means wise, and imprudent means foolish, unwise. So, here's how core values work. Whenever we start to do something that violates our core values, we feel guilty. We feel like that if we were to do it, it would be wrong or imprudent. So something inside of us says, don't do it, it's wrong, you'll be sorry. On the other hand, if what we're thinking about doing aligns with our core values, we feel good about it. We feel like it would be the right thing to do. And when I say the right thing to do, I mean the wise thing. If I do this today, bad things are not going to happen, but good things are going to happen. So, listen to me. If your kids have the right core values instilled within them, they don't even have to be that smart to make wise decisions. Now, I know all of you have geniuses. I understand that. You know, it's kind of interesting, but in the children's department, we always have parents that come and say, you know, my kid's too smart to be in this class. They need to be in the other class. Of course, the other class is always where their siblings are, or where their cousins are, or their friends are. But you need to understand something. The reason we want them to be in their class is because of our first core value. Everyone has a right to a presentation of the gospel at his or her level of understanding. We want to present the gospel at a level of their understanding. But that's not my point. That's not what I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is I found out that every child that goes to Cornerstone Fellowship is a genius. And I'm glad you feel that way. I want you to understand both of my children were geniuses. I have a granddaughter now, and I want you to understand. My granddaughter is prettier than any grandchild or any grandbaby I've ever seen. And my granddaughter is smarter than all of yours. It doesn't matter that she's only 6 weeks old. I can already tell. But just in case you're one of those parents or grandparents that weren't blessed, listen to me. If your kids have the right core values instilled within them, they don't even have to be that smart. They don't have to be the sharpest knife in the drawer. And they can still make wise decisions. Why? Because core values function like an internal gauge that tells them if and when a choice they're about to make violates what they've been taught to believe. Something inside of them will say, this is wrong. Don't do it. You'll be sorry. And they'll feel guilty if they go ahead and do it. Now, I want you to understand, my parents instilled certain core values within me, and that didn't mean that I always followed them. But I want you to understand, when I did something that violated those core values, inside I always felt guilty. I didn't want my mom to find out about it. Now, Dad, that was okay. He screwed up a lot in his life, so he understood. But Mom, she was perfect. On the other hand, if the decisions you're about to make aligns with their core values, it's confirmation that their decision is the right decision. And many times what they'll do is they'll seek out counsel just to make sure. Yeah. That's why core values are so important. They enable a person to make right decisions even if they don't possess much wisdom. In other words, they enable young and immature children to make good decisions even when they don't possess much wisdom, knowledge, or understanding. So as a parent, I thank God for core values. And as a parent, you should thank God for core values. The problem is the majority of parents are not instilling core values within their children. In fact, the majority of parents don't even know what core values are and how to do that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that next week. But I just want you to understand something. Core values are so important. They're essential for people making the right decisions in order to have a great life. But here's what's scary. You can make good, wise decisions in every area of your life but one. And that one foolish decision can throw a monkey wrench into everything else. And let me explain why that is. Life is made up of various aspects or parts. In other words, there's more to life than just making money. There's more to life than just sex, romance, and love, men. There's more to life than just raising children, women. So as you can see, life is made up of various aspects or parts. And we usually refer to those different aspects as domains. So you have the spiritual domain, which deals with your relationship with God. The marital domain, the parental domain, the vocational domain, the financial domain, the physical domain, etc. And all of these domains are interconnected. And because they're interconnected, every domain matters. In other words, every domain is important. As an example, your health affects your work, because if you're sick, you can't work. If you have financial problems, it's going to affect your marriage, and you're going to have marriage problems. If you have problems in your marriage, it's going to affect your children. Why? Because all of the domains of life are interconnected. Do you see that? So if you want to have a great life, then you have to make wise decisions in every area of your life, in every domain. Does that make sense? Good. If it doesn't make sense, think about it. If you have good children and you have a good job and your finances are in good shape, but you have a bad marriage, life sucks. Yeah. Or if you have a good marriage and good kids and a job that you enjoy, but you don't make much money at it, so you can't pay your bills, and the creditors are knocking at your door. People, let me tell you, life is not that good. So that's why I said you can make good, wise decisions in every area of your life but one, and that one foolish decision can throw a monkey wrench into everything else. So if you want to have a great life, then you need to have core values that cover every domain of life and not just the spiritual domain. You want to have core values that cover relationships, especially marriage, parenting, vocation, finances, health, and most important of all, your spiritual life. And if you're a parent, then you want to instill within your children core values that cover every aspect of life. Most of us don't do that. And that's why our children don't have good lives. I've heard this said before. I'm not sure that it's true, but it might be. I've heard parents say that's had problem children that you'll never be any happier than your most unhappy child. Now, if you've had problems with your children, then after service you can come up and you can say, Pastor, that's not true. You can learn to blah, blah, blah. Or if it's true for you, you can come and say, Pastor, that's true. I can tell you as a parent, you're only as happy as your most unhappy child. My child's done this or that. But as a parent, what we want to do is we want to instill within our children core values that cover every area of life so that they have a good marriage, so that they have a good relationship with their children, so that they raise their children in a way that they don't have any regrets, so that they have good health, so that they have a good job and they enjoy what they do and they're using their gifts, talents, and abilities. That's what you want to do. So let me give you a few core values that you need to have and that your children need to have in order to make the right decisions. Now, I'm not going to be able to give you all of the core values you need, but I'm going to give you a few examples to help you develop your own core values. All of these core values that I'm going to give you are biblical. In other words, all of these core values come from the Bible, and all of them are based on specific verses in the Bible. Now, this morning, the two core values that I'm going to give you have to do with work, or what we would call the vocational domain. And again, these are just a few of the core values that you need to instill within your children that have to do with work. I can't give you all of them, or this series would last all year. What I want to do is I want to give you a few of them, the most important ones. It will give you an example. And as you're going through the Bible and you come across these principles and you think, this would be a good core value. My children need to know this in order to have a great life. They need to know that if they violate this, then they're going to have a crappy life. If they make decisions that aligns with this, they're going to have a great life. You need to be able to do that. So, here's the very first core value that has to do with work. All work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. Do you want to know what's wrong with this younger generation? And when I say this younger generation, I want you to understand if you're younger, I'm not necessarily saying that it's wrong with you. You're probably the exception. In fact, according to your parents, you're fantastic. I'm talking about all the others. But you want to know what's wrong with this younger generation? They think they're too good to do certain jobs. They actually think that there are certain jobs that are beneath them. It's true. I've actually heard our own youth here at Cornerstone Fellowship make comments like this: I would never work in fast food. Or I would never work at a nursery. Parents, listen to me. If your child ever says that they would never work at a certain type of job, you get in their face and you let them know real fast that if you ever hear them say that again, you'll get them a job doing exactly that. Because all work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. And then if they do say that again, then you carry through with your threat. You don't ever draw a line in the sand unless you're ready to enforce it and to go all the way if necessary. So if your child says it again after you've warned them, then you go to McDonald's or you go to the Sonic and you fill out a work application for them. You personally take them to work and you pick them up. And then you tell the manager if they have any problem with your child to call you, because you will come down there and you will embarrass them in front of their coworkers as you set them straight. Why? Because you want to teach your child that all work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. If you're doing some type of job that's not immoral or not illegal, you have nothing to be embarrassed about. It doesn't matter where you work. In fact, let me show you something interesting. Turn with me, if you would, to the book of Genesis chapter 2, verse number 15. Notice what this says. Remember, these core values are biblical and they're based on certain scriptures. The Lord God took the man and they put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. To work it and to take care of it. To work it and to take care of it. So Adam's first job was working in the Garden of Eden. He was a gardener. Now, what amazes me about this is neither God nor Adam thought that he was overqualified to be a gardener. Think about it. Before the fall, Adam was a perfect human being. He was perfect mentally. He was perfect physically, he was perfect spiritually, and he was perfect emotionally. He was, for all intents and purposes, a perfect human being. In fact, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul referred to Jesus as the second Adam, which tells you something about the first Adam. Yeah, think about it. If Jesus was a perfect human being and he's referred to as the second Adam, then the first Adam must have been a perfect human being also. At least until the fall. Do you follow my reasoning? In fact, we get a glimpse at just how smart Adam was in Genesis chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. Notice what it says. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was his name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So Adam named not some, but all of the birds and animals. Now, according to Fact Monster, no one knows for sure how many species of animals actually exist on this earth. In fact, almost 10,000 new species are discovered each year. But scientists estimate that there are about 8.7 million different species on this earth, 6.5 million on land, and 2.2 million in the oceans. Now, according to Genesis chapter 2, verse number 20, this is what's kind of interesting about this. Adam named all of the birds and the animals on the land. 6.7 million different species. Now, how smart do you have to be to not only name 6.7 million different species, but to remember their name? Some of you can't even remember the names of your children if you have more than two. And sometimes I only had two. I get it wrong. Micah, Dad, I'm not Micah, I'm Macy. I know who you are. I'm talking to you. You know what I said. Macy, Dad, I'm Micah. I know you're Micah. You know, my dad would just go through the list. Yeah. Riddell, Carol, Doug, Alan, Steve, whoever you are, get over here. Oh, yeah. Adam named 6.7 million species, and he was able to remember the name. Now, I want you to think about this. The average person only has 40,000 words in his vocabulary. You only know about 40,000 words. If you don't believe that, go home, take out a dictionary, and start going through it. Don't look at the definitions. Look at those words and see how many you know. You'll know only about 40,000. Adam named 6.7 million different species and remembered their name. Adam must have been a brainiac. And yet he didn't think he was too good or too smart to be a gardener. And neither did God. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that in God's eyes, all work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. But let's go a little bit deeper. Turn with me, if you would, to the book of Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. And I want you to notice the very first clause. Whatever you do, whatever you do, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Now, do you see that? Whatever you do. Now, do you know what that tells me? It tells me that from God's perspective, what I do for a living is not nearly as important as how I do it. In fact, that's so good. That's a principle, and I'm going to give it to you, and I want you to write this down. This is a principle that you need to teach your children. Listen to me. When it comes to work, what you do is not nearly as important as how you do it. And Adam is a great example of this. As I said earlier, Adam was a gardener. His job was to take care of the Garden of Eden. So he did nursery work. And since this is worth repeating, I'm going to say it again. Neither God nor Adam thought that Adam was overqualified to be a gardener. In other words, Adam was not too good or too smart to work at a nursery. So that's the very first core value you need to instill within your children that pertains to work. All work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. But how does this core value help your children make wise decisions? Well, let's suppose that they go work for a company, and the company gets into financial problems, and so they have to lay off workers. So they lay off your child. Let me tell you something. If you've instilled this core value within your child, immediately they will start looking for work. They're going to decide that it's better to be employed than unemployed, regardless of what the job is. In other words, within them is going to be this core value that it's wrong to sit home without a job. So if they can't find another job in their field, or they can't be in a management position, they're not too good or too smart or overqualified to go work at Walmart or go work at Reese's. Let me just tell you something. If you decided you wouldn't want me or you didn't want me, I can't ever imagine that. Something would be wrong with you if you thought that. But if you did think that, I want you to understand something. I would not think that I'm too good to go to Walmart and apply for a job, or if I have to flip burgers at Sonic or flip burgers at McDonald's. But I'm going to get a job. And pretty soon I'm going to be running that place. My wife will tell you that's true. But I understand, and hopefully you understand this. It's wrong to sit at home without a job. Now, if you retired, that's different. You have what's called passive income. You've worked hard enough, you've been wise enough, you've put away so that when you hit your golden years, you get to enjoy it. Your work might be golf and fishing and hunting. Your job might be traveling. You get to do that because you worked hard. But if you're a college graduate And you get out and you can't find a job and you move back in with mom and dad and they want to know if you applied for jobs. You say, well, there's no jobs in my field. Well then, honey, I brought you a work application down at Supermart or at the convenience store or at one of the fast food chains. You are not too good or too smart or overqualified to work there. And when you instill that within your children, they'll make the right decisions. What's wrong with America is we have people who think that they're too good to work certain jobs. And let me tell you something, all work is honorable. All work is honorable. I haven't heard an amen yet. All work is honorable. Amen. As long as it's not immoral or illegal. There are certain jobs I won't do. Why? Because I'm going to stand before God one day. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell God I did that. But if I don't have to worry about that part, I'll take any job. My dad ingrained that within me when we were young. Now you need to understand, I'm using this as a euphemism. But Riddell and I used to say Dad would pimp us out to do anything. And that was not to be taken sexually. We weren't saying that. But people would call because their children wouldn't do certain work and say, George, would your boys like to? They'd love to do that. No, we didn't want to do that. But my dad taught me that all work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. And I can remember the few times that I would see certain friends while I was doing those type of works, and I'd be embarrassed. And if my dad ever saw that, he'd look at me and said, son, all work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. Now here's the second core value that has to do with work. You ready for it? When you have a job, regardless of what it is, you give a full day's work for a full day's pay. If you don't, then you're stealing from your employer. In other words, he's paying for a full day's work and you're not giving it to him, but you're taking his money. That's called stealing. You're taking something that's not yours because you didn't earn it. Turn back to Colossians chapter 3, verse number 23. This is a great verse. You ought to memorize it, make your children memorize it, and they will hate it until they become an adult. And then they'll start talking like you to their children. Notice what it says. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. Work at it with all your heart. Work at it with all your heart. As working for the Lord, not for human masters. Now, do you see the part that says work at it with all your heart? Surely you did. I repeated it 3 times. That means to put your heart and soul into what you're doing. It means to give it your all. It means to not hold anything back. It means to do the best job you can each and every day. Let me tell you what Lisa and I say to each other, because this is human nature. Whenever you get ready to go on vacation, have you ever noticed the week before you go on vacation, it's kind of hard to work? Because all you can think about is, we're going on vacation. We're going here, or we're going to do this. Oh, we're going to have so much fun. And you have the tendency to want to kind of coast that week before vacation. So you know what I always tell Lisa? I'm going to finish strong. I'm going to finish strong. And she'll look at me and say, I'm going to finish strong. What we mean by that is we're going to work just as hard all the way up until that very minute we go on vacation. Let me assure you that if you told me, Pastor, you have 3 months, we're going to find another pastor, you just don't cut the mustard anymore. Again, I can't imagine that, but if you did that, I want you to know for those 3 months, I'd bust my tail. And here's what I would tell Lisa. I'm going to finish strong. Now, look at the last part of that verse, Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Now, they were indentured servants, so when it says human masters, you could put employers in there. As working for the Lord, not for employers. In other words, you work as if Jesus was your boss, because in a sense he is. Jesus is your Lord and Master, and He's going to reward you one day for working hard. In fact, let me show you something interesting that most people miss about this verse. Look back at Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, but let's also read the next verse with it, verse 24. Notice what it says. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters or employers. Since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Or in other words, it is the Lord Christ you are working for. Now, according to verse number 4, if we work hard, we're going to receive an inheritance from the Lord. We're going to receive it as a reward. Now, here's what's interesting. In this world, we get an inheritance when others die. Both of Lisa's parents have passed away. They weren't married at the time, so when her dad passed away, we received an inheritance. I shouldn't say that. Lisa received an inheritance from Cooey. When her mom passed away, she received an inheritance from her mom. My mom has passed away. When my dad passes away, I'll receive an inheritance from him. When I die, my children will receive an inheritance from me. So in this world, we get an inheritance when others die, and it's from what they earned on this earth while they were alive. But it doesn't work that way in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, we get an inheritance when we die. Yeah. In the spiritual world, we get an inheritance when we die. And the amount of inheritance that we receive is based on how hard we worked on the job. It comes from what we earned while we were alive on this earth. So in essence, how you work at your job determines your inheritance. Look back at Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 and 24. Notice what it says. Keep this in context. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for employers, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. As a reward for what? Working hard for Him. It is the Lord Christ you are serving or who you're working for. You see, our work has eternal implications even if it has no apparent eternal value. Yeah. Yeah. What we do for a living, it doesn't matter what you do. If you flip burgers, if you carry out groceries, if you install telephones, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, I want you to understand something. Your work has eternal implications, even if it doesn't seem like it has any eternal value. Because you're not working for your employer, you're working for Jesus Christ. You're a witness for Jesus. People see that work, so your word has credibility. So when you share the gospel of Jesus Christ, people listen to you because they respect you. If you're a lazy bum, they don't want to hear anything you have to say about the Lord. Now, how in the world does this core value help your children make wise decisions? Well, I'm going to use a personal example if you don't mind. When I went to work for Southwestern Bell, I was 20 years old. Immediately, the person that I rode with the first week, Richard Johnson, gave me the nickname of Cubby because I was 20 years old. Everyone that I worked with was either in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. Old timers. Now, here's what's interesting. All of these college graduates would come, and I'm big on education, so I'm not meaning this in a derogatory manner, but you need to understand something. Just because you come out with a college degree doesn't mean that you know how the world works. So all these college graduates would come out, and they would go into management, never having worked in the field. And all of these college graduates would come out, and they would be engineers. And they're designing the products that we're using in the field. And so they would come up with this new product and they would say, we're no longer using this, this is what we're going to use. And the old guys would take it, they'd look it over, they'd turn it over, they'd see it from everything, and they would go, this is crap. And they'd throw it on the table and say, this doesn't work. I'm not going to use that, I'm going to do the old stuff. And they would say, well, we're not stocking the old stuff. And then they'd get kind of upset and they say, well, I'm going to lay down on the job. I can stretch that one job out all day. Or the boss would come in and say, we're no longer doing this, we're doing that. And they'd get all upset and they would just say, well, I'm going to lay down on the job. And it's kind of funny because they'd always look at me. I'm Cubby. Cubby, what are you going to do? And I would say this: I'm going to do whatever they ask me to do as long as it's not illegal or immoral. Because if Southwestern Bell doesn't make money, they don't need me and I won't have a job. If they tell me to do it standing on my head, I'm going to do it standing on my head. If they tell me to spit on my fingers before I do it, I'm going to spit on my fingers. Now let me tell you something, that was the right decision. I wasn't going to lay down on the job. I wasn't going to give them a full day's work for a full day's pay, because my dad had taught me that. Didn't know it was Colossians 3:23, had no idea. My dad didn't give the scriptures. If he did, it was the book of George Nolan, chapter 1, verse 2. But here's what I want you to see. I was a young, immature kid. And I didn't have much wisdom, but I would make the wise and the right decisions because of the core values instilled within me. Now let me tell you what happened. When God called me to preach, I told them that I'm going to be leaving, and I gave them 2 weeks' notice. Actually, I gave them a month's notice, but here's what's interesting. The second line supervisor, Jerry Curtis, came to see me, and he took me out to lunch. And he said, Alan, are you sure you want to do this? Why don't you just continue to install telephones, repair telephones, and you can preach on the side? I said, no, Mr. Curtis, I'm sorry, but I feel like God's called me full time. I need to go back to school. I need to get a degree in what I'm going to be preaching on. Well, I tell you what, just in case it doesn't work out, why don't I give you 6 months leave and you try it out for 6 months? You go back to school, you take that job as a preacher and you preach, but if it doesn't work out, you can come back. I said, well, I appreciate it, Mr. Curtis, but I'm not going to come back. God's called me to preach. That's what I'm going to do. He said, well, here's what I'm going to do. On your last day, I'm going to wait 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to give me a call. If you want your old job, you can come back and get it. Now, let me tell you something. When I told people what happened, because I wanted to know why he took me to lunch, he said, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. I want you to know I was not the best installer and I was not the best repairman. That comes through experience. The only reason he did that is because he saw that in my heart I was going to give a full day's work for a full day's pay. And if they asked me to do something, I was going to do it as long as it wasn't illegal or immoral, or wasn't going to be something that would hurt someone. Let me tell you something. If you ingrain these two core values within your children, I can guarantee you that you won't ever have to support them when they become adults. Because if they lose their job, they'll go find another one. It might not be the job they want. It might not even be in their field of expertise. It might be the biggest demotion they've ever seen in their life. But you don't have to worry about them moving back home and sponging off of you until they find just the right job because they want to go into management. No. Because you've ingrained within them that all work is honorable as long as it's not immoral or illegal. Plus, they'll be the very last ones to be laid off because they'll have a reputation for being a hard worker. And that reputation will precede them. So there will always be someone just waiting to snatch them up to come work for them. If you want a real life example, let me just tell you something. I'll give you one. I guarantee you that if Robert Harbuck lost his job today, he'd have a job by tomorrow and probably a better job because his reputation of being one of the hardest workers you'll ever find precedes him.